Well, I had success. It was distortion in the focus scale ring. A little bit of leaning on it in the appropriate way. That's nice and smooth, catches nowhere. So that's all aligned up, ready to go. So our focus mechanism is complete and we can move on to other parts of the camera. So we'll turn my attention to the top of the camera now and we'll put in the film advance sprocket, or take-up spool. So I need to put a touch of grease on that boss in the centre and a touch on that spring. That's where the spool runs on there. That's that. Yeah. Here is the piece that drives it. Let's find the screws. Okay, so I've got to clean these components up because I haven't done that yet. These components are very clean. I'm just using the opportunity as I clean them to check for any wear, any obvious signs of problems. Not expecting to find anything. The camera has probably had very little use. Might have had a bit of abuse, but no, not much use. Okay, so a bit of lubricant there, which I'll apply to the shaft at this point and on this face where it runs against the collar. That can go on there. This only goes in one way and you've got to rotate it to get this coupled up with the top of this take-up spool. That's good. 3 screws. Oops, having trouble here with the magnetised screwdriver. I'll have to go and deal with that. Just checking that rotates smoothly, and it does. Yes, that's good. It was nice and smooth. The door. Alright, must be National Interruptions Day today. I can't seem to get more than 5 minutes work done without the door going or the phone ringing or somebody sending messages that I don't need to see. Alright, so that part's all good. Now this rewind knob and shaft, I couldn't get that thing apart. I can't say I tried extremely hard, but I certainly can't get that thing to pop apart. So I'm just going to lubricate it as it stands, and we'll see how we get on. It feels very dry. The spring that's in there probably got no lubrication at all. There's that. very effectively just wiped that grease straight off there. So let's just see if I can get a bit in from this end. And all I really want to do here is get this to run a little bit smoother, so that as the film is towed through the camera, it is nice and smooth, doesn't make grating noises or anything unfortunate like that. It's like a slightly tight fit in here, and it may well be that there's some distortion in this piece. One thing that often happens with cameras is that people will drop them. Now you can imagine that when you've got the knob on the top of the camera like that, and the camera hits the ground with a big thump, that provides quite a bit of force on here, and that can distort a mount like this, such that it's no longer sitting quite square, or that the hole is effectively no longer quite round, it's a little bit oval, and so things don't run as smoothly as they otherwise should. And of course it's very hard to see that sometimes, to see exactly what's happened, and it's even worse trying to rectify it. With a little bit of lubricant in there, that runs quite smoothly now, so I'm fairly happy about that. I might put some other grease on there that'll work a bit better, but that's basically, that looks like that'll go, so that's good. Right, that can go back in the camera, I think, and once it's on the camera I'll have a better idea about the state of it. Now for that to go back on the camera, I want to put this piece back on, because that goes on first. Now I've got two chrome screws, and these two chrome screws, I found those holding the bellows struts into the back of the camera, and I think that probably they began their life there, and if they didn't begin their life there, well, they should have done. Much more appropriate to have chrome screws there than the plain nickel plated ones that it had previously. Chrome on chrome is a much more satisfactory looking finish. So that's that, and the rewind knob itself, we'll have a quick look at this, because I suspect that this has been dropped, which is of course not uncommon. Just to give this a quick wipe, there's not much to be able to see there, and I'll just have a look at the surface of this, see if I can see any telltale rough marks. Of course I may well not do, and so often cameras get dropped on a carpeted floor, in which case there will be no marks to be seen. There'll be some damage, but it's fairly well hidden. You can't understand how it could have happened. Other times cameras will get dropped, they've been in their leather case at the time. Again, so there'll be no sharp marks to show what has hit what. It certainly rotates, it's not as smooth as I would like it to be. I've got to get some lubricant to that spring, and I've got some nice dirty black graphite grease which should do that job for me nicely, which I'll do right now. I wanted to find two chrome screws to go on that top plate, so I'm just checking through my selection of screws now to see if I've got anything that's particularly appropriate. Something like that might do. I've got two that match. That looks a bit better, much better than empty holes. Yeah, that focus ring is well distorted. It's certainly had a thump or a bump, this camera. See if I can even things out of it. Right, what next? Oh, some film advance components, I think. The springs and their retaining screws. I always have to have a think about these to make sure I'm putting the right thing in the right place. So far so good. Alright, this component rotates with the sprocket in the film advance and meters the film effectively by locking the film advance once the frame has been advanced. So I'm just cleaning that, make sure I get rid of any old grease, have a close look at that to make sure it's all looking happy. I'm going to put a little bit of molybdenum lubricant on this cam, that surface there in particular. That's where the lever runs and drops into that position, so I just want to make sure that that's got some molybdenum on it. I'll put some in the middle, or just give that a wipe so it just where it runs on that post. And here we have it. There, bit of fluff. As the film runs through the camera, that rotates nice and smooth. Clean up the components, the rest of the components for there. There's a bit of staining on that part, a bit of brown stain, not sure what's done that. Lay these out in order. Have I forgotten anything? No, it looks like all those components are there. Right, so I'll clean these components up. Again, I'm just using a bit of solvent on the cotton bud, Q-tip for those who call them Q-tips. Clean that surface off. I'm not sure what that staining is. It doesn't entirely look like rust. And I'll use my molybdenum paste. I'll just run a tiny bit through those surfaces, hardly at all. And now to the assembly. See if I can do this where you can see it. Just check that that's all sitting correctly. It appears that it is. I'll nip that screw up. Now, this ratchet wheel here, ratchet teeth in one direction, but stop you being able to wind the film back unless the lever's been lifted up out of the way. Effectively just means that the film can travel in one direction only. The other one will lock the film advance when it's as the lever drops into it. This one I'm going to put a little bit of grease into it. The lever will drop into it of course once it's enough film has passed the gate. So this just drops down into position. Now the spring under here needs to come out from underneath there and be hooked to the back of this lever. If I can lift it up. It's hard getting a grip on a greasy wire with a pair of tweezers. That's that. The spring at the front is for the shutter release. But this component here we're mostly interested in at the moment. This is for the film advance. That is the reverse lever, the rewind lever. So I'm just wiping that of any grease. That's just checking the shape of that. It doesn't look exactly flat, and I'm just making sure the pieces that should be bent are bent. They should stick up slightly. That looks good. That I can put the barest smear of grease on there, just a token amount. That pops on here. And this collar screws down and locates it. And that of course is left hand threaded. It seems good. And if I had the tools on hand, I'd tighten that up. Excuse the noise while I dig in this toolbox. Here's one of the parts I want. And the other part something's not happening. That's better. That's it. That component's in place. If we push the rewind lever across, it frees up, lifts that ratchet off and allows us to wind the film back. As soon as you revolve forward again, it lifts off there again. So as soon as you start to advance the film, it stops. And this of course is free. So far so good. Now the shutter release. Now there's a reason I haven't put the door on the front of the camera yet, and that's because we have to put a washer back in place. A little spacer washer that fell out when we were taking the camera apart. But first of all, I'll just clean this carefully. And I'm looking at it, there's quite a pronounced line around that piece there, and it appears to be something from production. I don't think it's something that was needed there. I think it's just a machine mark that shouldn't have been there. Alright, so our shutter release. Well, what am I interested in here for lubricant? Let's get this. We need to put a little bit of molybdenum down these two positions. That's where this shaft and that shaft run. I want to run a tiny bit of molybdenum here. That's where this lever presses up against, and that needs to be quite free. And the third position is here, that little hole there. That runs over this guide post. That needs to be lubricated. And finally, the centre post, centre of it, where it runs on the shaft. So, there is our little spacer washer that I mentioned previously. Now to start getting all this together. This spring needs to come right around here, back under a post underneath that lever, and that will pull that lever forward into position. So getting it into position is entertaining. And I've got to push the thing through underneath, get it behind that stud, and then lift it into position, just like that. See, I told you it was easy. Yeah. Our spacer. Our spacer goes on here, and it's most important. We don't want to lose that, otherwise the shutter release won't work properly. The shutter release goes over that shaft, right up against that spacer washer, and you can see the shutter release goes over the post here too. So there's our shutter release. Now, if we were to simulate advancing the film one frame by rolling the sprocket forward, we can then depress the shutter. What happens is you roll it forward, is this cam, this little lever here rides on this cam, and when it picks up, it's pushed backwards, clears the shutter release, and you're ready to go. As soon as you press the shutter release, I'll put a little bit of lubricant on that face. When you press the shutter release, it bears on this lever, which lifts this lever out of contact with the cam, and so sets you up to advance the film for the next frame. Well, that's quite good. I'm just going to pop their film advance, their advance knob on there just for convenience. That's all working nicely. So that's our film advance components, apart from the frame counter which goes on just before the top goes on. So next I think we can put the front door back in place, and for that we'll want our 2 cartridge paper washers, our 2 hinge pins screws, and not an awful lot besides, a little touch of grease which I'll show you shortly.